In the last chapter, we sailed to Limeland and learned our father, Lord Bartholomew, left the city for Highland with the escaped criminal and fire magician Fargo on his tail. Originally, Limeland's lord, Hoson Shrieker, locked Fargo within the city's tower jail, but after Lord Shrieker's mysterious death, Fargo was released and fled the city. We've hypothesized that Lord Shrieker protected the Fire Ruby, and was killed by an unknown entity who stole the ruby, released Fargo, and gave him the Fire Ruby to take toward Highland. Queen Deanna implored us to bring Fargo to justice, if not for the sake of her city, then to remove a barrier that stands between us and reaching our father. Making our way through the treacherous Barragoon mine, we discovered the ancient ruins deep below where we encountered Shilf, a servant of something called Mammon. Defeating her and exiting the ruins brings us to the arid Dindom Dries, and the border of Highland, Kingdom of Fire and Sword. Traveling through the seemingly endless desert, whether by chance or guided by some unknown force, we stumble upon an ancient platform that teleported us to a place beyond time and space, Shamwood. Shamwood was the kingdom that disappeared on the Day of Grief 1,000 years ago, and it's here that Chapter 5 begins, as we speak with the Magician King Lavar, the one responsible for opening the Eltale book long ago. Following this conversation, we'll pass through Highland's small border town of Greenock, learning firsthand of the tragedies occurring in Highland. Finally, we'll brave the deadly volcanic underpass known as the Boil Hole, and confront Fargo. Unbeknownst to us, however, the Fire Magician will have something chilling to reveal about why he left Carmel for Highland. Shamwood's sole construct is the imposing pyramid the size of a city that may have been the kingdom's key stronghold, but now serves only as an enormous prison for a single prisoner. Taking the ancient steps from the temple base, we'll ascend, passing through empty, echoing halls, dimly lit by weak, fluttering flames. Once we reach the top of the structure, we'll come face to face with the one person in Keltland's recorded history to have ever opened the Eltale book, the one responsible for the day that Keltland's people have passed on tones of dread and despair, Shamwood's King Lavar. He's understandably surprised to see you, as we're the first to find the Phantom City since he was banished long ago. He explains that once he held the Eltale book, but when he opened it to unleash its incredible powers, he was not worthy. The only powers he could control were those of famine and destruction. He could hate, but no longer love. He could terrify, but no longer inspire. However, the great magician Epona came to his rescue and freed him from the curse after their great battle, which destroyed most of Shamwood, and the once lush and green land in the process. However, he was exiled for eternity for the crimes he committed while under the book's curse, until the evil called Mammon is defeated. Only then will he find peace, and he beseeches us to free not only him, but to rid Keltland of this evil. There is so much to interpret from Lavar's dialogue here that, like the other key conversations in the game, we'll break down each part bit by bit. First, and arguably the most important, is when he mentions that when he opened the Eltale book to unleash its powers, he believes he was unworthy, causing him to wield powers that could only destroy, left with feelings of hate and contempt, while devoid of love and compassion. Recall when we spoke with Epona that she explained the Eltale book under no circumstance can ever be opened, and needs to be returned to the monastery crypts for safekeeping. Lavar, however, believes he was simply unworthy of the book, conflicting with Epona's statements that the book should be locked away, never to be opened. This is one of the most important facets of Quest's story, in addition to formulating what a complex character Lavar is. Lavar was never an evil king before the book's curse. Keltland's various factions had warred with one another for ages, and he sought to put an end to the chaos, even if it was by force and subjugation. Since his failure and the subsequent fallout, for the last 1,000 years, Lavar has reflected on what occurred due to what he perceives as his own weakness that allowed the book to control him. The empty city he's been banished within is a constant reminder of his self-perceived unworthiness and what it's cost himself, his people, and his country. The once powerful king and adept magician retains a desperate need to prove to himself that this disaster wasn't beyond his control, despite everything he'd worked to achieve. Maybe if he had just been a little more powerful, careful, and wise, he could have overcome the book's power and used it for the good of Keltland. So the question is, can we really blame him for feeling this way? In the end, he's only human, living in the shadow of the great tragedy he caused his own people, forever. So while we can judge Lavar for his past, we should never forget what he represents, what he struggles with, and what it means to err, desire, and ultimately be human. The other side of this, however, is that, I believe, despite the curse being broken, LeVar will forever be chained to the book, and perhaps it's this connection that also binds him to his immortality. He's the only one in Keltland's history that understands what it means to be possessed by the book, and while the hand that controlled him relinquished, the feeling of its grip remains. For this reason, I believe a part of him will always pine for the book, which, along with payment for his crimes, is another reason he was banished by Epona, to keep LeVar, despite himself, from attempting to wield the book once more. Remember that the elemental gems were created by the Great Spirits to quarter the book's power, and we need only observe Solvering, Zels, and Nepti to understand how easily one gem can corrupt, or further corrupt, their wielder. So perhaps his longing to fix his past mistakes is in part due to his inability to accept the destruction he caused, but also because a part of his soul will always desire the Eltale book. Luckily, there is hope for LeVar judging by the end of his dialogue, stating that he'd finally be at peace and freed from his endless banishment should the one called Mammon be destroyed. This is the second time now we've heard of this thing called Mammon, previously mentioned by Shelf, and it's odd that instead of destroying the Eltale book, LeVar claims that it's Mammon that must be what's destroyed. In fact, it raises why the Eltale book wasn't destroyed to begin with, and instead had its capabilities quartered. Does this mean that the book has some otherworld force protecting it? Surely this suggests that this thing called Mammon and the Eltale book are related somehow, or perhaps that they are one and the same. Is it possible that Epona knows more than she's let on based on our brief encounter with her? This opens so many more questions, but they'll have to wait as we still need to catch up with Fargo and our father. We can return to the Dindom Dries by taking the teleporter we used to get here, and checking the map, there's a nearby town by the name of Greenock just to the west of the desert. However, we'll find upon reaching Greenock that it's been nearly reduced to rubble, but luckily, the inn is one of the few buildings still standing. Once inside, we'll surprisingly find Shannon, who will give us some valuable information on what's happened here. Highland's King Bigus has somehow acquired enormous powers, and he's the one that ordered the city destroyed and caused his people to suffer, with the sole purpose of testing his strength. To think that Bigus would test his strength against his own people is shocking, and our father is still heading deeper into Highland territory where the bloodthirsty king resides. To catch up with him, we need to hightail through the Boil Hole to reach Barragoon Moor, the final county in Keltland we've yet to travel to. However, Fargo still stands between us and our father, and considering that Greenock was burned down, is it possible that the fire-starter Fargo is behind the attack? That would prove that Fargo was working with Bigus, however, and if Highland released Karma's highest-profile criminal, this could escalate into a full-blown conflict between the kingdoms. The more we close the distance between us and Lord Bartholomew, the more dangerous the situation becomes, so we'll head straight for the Boil Hole and begin working our way towards Barragoon Moor. The Boil Hole is filled with dangerous enemies and is seemingly ready to literally boil over at any second as the ground quakes and hot steam chokes the air. Toward the end of the tunnel, we'll enter a massive cavern, with several naturally forming vents that spew out smoke. Through the smokescreen, we'll make out the imposing figure that awaits us, the monster who played a part in Highland's massacre at Greenock, and with the fire ruby in hand, still bloodied from Lord Shrieker's death, Fargo. Surprisingly, Fargo welcomes us, having learned that the one with the 3 other elemental gems would be passing through to reach Highland. He explains that he was originally told to bring King Bigus the Fire Ruby, but that the king is a fool for thinking he'd simply hand it over, especially now that he's felt the great power it can grant him. Fargo claims that he, and he alone, will be the king of Keltland, that the world belongs to him, and that it's time we hand over the elemental gems. Of course, with the innocents that lost their lives to Fargo fresh in our mind, and knowing our father is moving toward grave danger, we'll brandish our staff instead and attack. The points to observe in Fargo's dialogue are that, for one, this verifies he's indeed working for King Bigus, and considering Greenock was razed to the ground not long after Fargo passed through, I feel it's safe to assume he'd done so on the king's orders as well. It's likely Shannon discovered Bigus ordered Fargo to do so during Greenock's massacre, and this is how she knew who was behind the deed. It also proves that Vigus employed the still unknown agent to acquire the Fire Ruby, which led to Lord Shrieker's death. This agent then freed Fargo and was ordered to deliver the Fire Ruby to King Vigus in exchange for his freedom from the prison. These crimes against Karma will lead to war with Highland, dissolving the once long-lasting peace the kingdoms once held with one another. This is confirmed if you return to Lineland and speak with Queen Deanna, who is preparing her soldiers against Highland after Fargo's defeat. Victory in battle will award us with the Fire Ruby, and with the final elemental gem in our possession, we head straight into the Lion's Den, Barragoon Moor. This is the last place our father could have traveled to in search of the Eltale book, the only place we could find the one behind Lord Shrieker's death, and perhaps even the one who played the part in Selvaring, Zels, and Nepti learning of the elemental gems. It must be here that the Eltale book's thief is hiding as well, and perhaps we'll learn that they're all one and the same. For better or worse, we're beginning to approach the climax in Quest's story. Everything that's occurred thus far is about to spill over, as the secrets of the Eltale book unravel before us. Secrets that may have been better left undiscovered. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you'll join me next week for the semi-final chapter in Quest's story explained. Please subscribe and tick the bell icon to be notified on the next video, and follow me on Twitter for updates. Until then, thanks for watching.